The evening had a calm beauty to it, with sunlight fading softly through the curtains as Emma set the table. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room, mixing with the sweetness of chocolate cake cooling on the counter. She wanted everything to feel perfect. Her husband, Daniel, had invited his old college friend, Ryan, for dinner, someone she had heard about for years but barely remembered meeting. Daniel often spoke of him as the one who kept their college days fun and full of laughter. Emma wasn't sure what to expect, but she hoped it would be a pleasant evening. When the doorbell rang, Daniel's cheerful voice echoed through the hallway. "He's here." He opened the door, and there stood Ryan, taller than she remembered, dressed simply in a navy shirt and jeans. His smile was friendly but calm, not loud or attention-seeking. Emma greeted him politely, and for a moment, something about his eyes caught her attention. There was warmth in them, a quiet understanding, as if he noticed more than he said. Dinner began with easy conversation. Daniel and Ryan shared old memories, laughing about college days and late-night adventures. Emma listened, smiling, though most of the stories were new to her. Ryan had a gentle way of speaking, never trying to dominate the room, but always making his words count. He asked her about her work, her hobbies, and how she and Daniel had been doing. His tone was genuine, not forced, and that made her feel unexpectedly comfortable as the evening went on. Emma began to notice little details she couldn't ignore: the way Ryan listened intently when she spoke, how his eyes softened when she smiled, how his laugh had a calmness that filled the room without effort. She wasn't thinking anything wrong, but it was rare for her to feel so seen. Daniel, though loving, had been distant lately. His work kept him busy, his mind often elsewhere. They still cared for each other, but some part of their connection had gone quiet over time. The three of them moved to the living room after dinner, sipping coffee and watching the glow of the fireplace. The conversation turned lighter: vacations, old friends, funny mistakes from college. Ryan told a story about how Daniel once tried to cook spaghetti in a coffee pot, and they all laughed so hard that Emma's eyes watered. For a while, it felt like they were back in simpler times, with no distance, no wait. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen. "It's from work. I need to take this maybe 15 minutes, he said, standing up. Emma nodded, though she noticed the look of disappointment in Ryan's eyes. Daniel stepped outside to talk, leaving the two of them in the warm, quiet living room. The laughter faded, replaced by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Emma collected the empty coffee cups and stood up to take them to the kitchen, but Ryan's voice stopped her. "You don't have to clean right now," he said softly. "You've done enough for one night." His tone wasn't commanding, just gentle. She smiled and sat back down. "Old habits," she said lightly. Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes thoughtful. "It's been a long time since I sat in a house that felt this peaceful," he said. "You've made it feel like home the moment I walked in." Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. "That's kind of you to say." He looked at her for a moment, not in a bold or uncomfortable way, but like he was trying to understand something. Then he looked away, exhaling slowly. "Emma," he said finally, his tone different now, careful. "There's something I've wanted to say for years. I probably shouldn't, but it's been sitting in my chest for too long." Her hands went still in her lap. The warmth of the room suddenly felt heavier. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Ryan hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "When I first met you all those years ago, I remember thinking Daniel was the luckiest guy I knew. You had this calmness about you, the kind that made everyone around you feel steady. I didn't even know you well, but I noticed it. And after all these years, seeing you again tonight, I realize it's still there." Emma's heart began to beat faster, not because of what he said, but because of how real it sounded. He wasn't trying to charm her or make her uncomfortable. His words felt honest, like something he had carried for too long. "I'm sorry if this sounds strange," Ryan continued quietly. "I don't mean anything inappropriate. I just wanted you to know that sometimes people leave a mark on us, even when they don't realize it. You did that? You still do?" Emma looked down, her breath uneven. She wasn't sure what to say. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. Not about beauty, not about admiration, but about something deeper. Daniel loved her. She knew that. But their marriage had fallen into routine, safe, predictable, quiet. Hearing someone notice her in this way reminded her of how much she had changed. How much she had missed being seen not as a wife or a caretaker, but as herself. The sound of Daniel's car pulling back into the driveway broke the silence. Ryan quickly straightened up, his calm composure returning, though his eyes carried something unspoken. "Forget I said anything," he murmured, almost to himself. "It's just something I needed to let go of." Emma nodded slowly, her heart still unsteady. She didn't know what to think, only that something about this moment would stay with her. When Daniel walked in, everything returned to normal. The three of them talked a bit more, finished dessert, and laughed about old memories. But beneath the light conversation, there was a quiet current that neither Emma nor Ryan could ignore. Later, as she stood at the door saying goodbye, Ryan smiled politely. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "It was good to see you both." His tone was friendly, nothing more. Yet when their eyes met for the last time, something silent passed between them. Not longing, not guilt, just understanding. After he left, Emma stood by the window, watching the taillights disappear down the street. She didn't know why her chest felt tight or why the evening replayed in her mind. It wasn't love or temptation, it was something softer, something harder to define. That night, lying beside Daniel, she closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but the quiet of the room only made her thoughts louder. She wasn't thinking about Ryan's words as much as the truth behind them. How sometimes it takes a stranger to remind us of who we used to be. The evening had begun as a simple dinner, but by the time the lights went out, something inside Emma had changed quietly, deeply, and without warning. Emma stood still, her hands resting on the edge of the table as Ryan's words hung in the air. The warmth of the living room seemed to fade into a strange stillness. She wasn't sure if she wanted to hear more or stop him right there. Her mind was full, but her voice came out calm. "Ryan, what are you trying to say?" she asked quietly. He looked up at her, his eyes soft but honest. "I mean, there are some things a person carries for years thinking they'll forget, but they don't," he said. His tone wasn't dramatic, just real, like someone finally deciding to stop hiding. "You've probably never noticed, but you've always been someone who mattered to me in a way I could never explain." Emma's breath caught. She didn't move, afraid that any reaction might make the moment heavier than it already was. Ryan took a deep breath and continued, his voice lower now. "When I met you years ago, I was at a time in my life when I didn't believe in peace anymore. You had this way of making everything around you calm. You laughed easily. You listened when people spoke. I remember thinking that whoever you ended up with would be lucky." Emma shook her head lightly, trying to brush away the tension. "Ryan, that was a long time ago. People change." "I've changed," she said, her words rushed, unsure where the conversation was heading. He gave a faint smile. "Maybe, but kindness doesn't fade. I see it even now. Tonight reminded me why you made such a lasting impression. You didn't just light up a room, you steadied it." Emma looked away. Her fingers fidgeted with the napkin on the table. No one had said something like that to her in years, not even Daniel. Lately, her husband had been quiet, often lost in work. Their talks had become shorter, their laughter rare. Life had settled into routine, safe but dull. Hearing someone describe her with that kind of warmth felt unfamiliar. It wasn't romantic exactly, it was recognition. Ryan seemed to sense her unease. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted to say what's been stuck in my heart for a long time. You don't have to say anything back." Emma tried to steady her thoughts. "Ryan, I appreciate your honesty. I really do. But you shouldn't." "I know," he interrupted gently. "You're right. I shouldn't say these things. You're married. Daniel's my friend. That's why I've never said it before. But tonight, sitting here, I realized if I don't say it now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know the truth that you've always meant something to someone who never said it out loud." His words came out with quiet strength, not desperation. He wasn't trying to take anything from her, just giving her something to understand. It was strange how simple and deep it sounded at the same time. Emma's eyes softened. "You didn't have to say this," she whispered. "But thank you for saying it kindly." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt thick but not heavy. It was full of meaning, the kind that comes from things that were never meant to be spoken. Emma thought of the years she had spent hiding her own feelings of being unseen. There was no romance in what Ryan said, only truth. A truth that made her remember the woman she used to be before routine took over. Ryan leaned back on the couch, his expression thoughtful. "I don't want you to misunderstand," he said quietly. "This isn't about trying to change your life or make you question your marriage. I respect Daniel more than anyone. But sometimes people deserve to hear how deeply they've affected someone. You deserve that." Emma looked at him again, her heart calm now, but full. "You know, Ryan," she said softly, "sometimes we don't realize the effect we have on others. And sometimes someone's words can remind us that we're still alive inside. Maybe that's what you did tonight." He nodded slowly, as if relieved that she understood. "That's all I wanted." For a moment, silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. The sound of rain tapping lightly against the windows made everything feel slower. Emma felt something shift quietly inside her. Not love, not confusion, but awareness. Ryan looked toward the door, his voice steady again. "I should probably go soon." "It's late," she nodded. "Daniel should be back any minute." As if on cue, headlights flashed through the window. The sound of a car door closing echoed from the driveway. Ryan stood up, his face calm but distant now. The moment was closing, but its weight would stay. Before Daniel entered, Ryan spoke one last time, his voice almost a whisper. "Emma, please don't think too much about what I said. I just needed you to hear it once. You deserve to be reminded that you matter." Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to reply, to say something that matched the honesty he had shown. But the sound of Daniel unlocking the door stopped her. Daniel stepped in, shaking off the rain, his usual cheerful energy filling the space. "Sorry about that, guys. That call took forever." He glanced between them, unaware of what had just passed. "Did I miss anything?" Emma forced a small smile. "Nothing important," she said quietly. Ryan smiled too, his tone light again. "We were just talking about old times. It's been good catching up." Daniel laughed. "That's what I like to hear. Let's get that cake before it's too late." As Daniel moved toward the kitchen, Ryan and Emma exchanged one final look, a quiet, respectful acknowledgement. It wasn't guilt and it wasn't regret. It was understanding. For the rest of the evening, everything appeared normal. They laughed, shared stories, and Daniel talked about his work while Ryan listened politely. But beneath the laughter, Emma felt something new, a spark of clarity she hadn't felt in years. When Ryan finally left that night, the sound of the door closing felt heavier than usual. Emma stood there for a moment, the echo of his words still in her chest. "You deserve to be reminded that you matter." She didn't know why those words touched her so deeply. It wasn't love or attraction, it was being seen, being acknowledged after so long. She realized how far she and Daniel had drifted into silence without noticing. Ryan hadn't come to break that. He had simply pointed it out. Later that night, lying in bed, Emma listened to Daniel's soft breathing beside her. She felt grateful, confused, and strangely awake. Ryan's confession had not started something new. It had reminded her of something she had lost, the need to be heard, to be appreciated, to be alive. As sleep finally came, she thought about how words could change people, not because of what they promised, but because of what they revealed. Ryan's truth had been simple, honest, and without expectation, but it had shaken her heart in the quietest, most unexpected way. When Daniel walked back into the room, everything shifted. The heavy silence vanished, replaced by his usual cheer. Ryan straightened up immediately, his calm face hiding whatever emotions had been there moments ago. Emma forced a polite smile, her heart still unsteady from what she'd just heard. The rest of the evening passed like nothing unusual had happened. Daniel talked about work. Ryan laughed at his jokes, and Emma tried her best to keep her voice steady. But deep inside, something had changed. The air felt different, quieter, as if words had been spoken that no one could take back. After dessert, they moved to the porch for a few minutes. The night air was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the silence between sentences. Ryan talked about his travels, a new job, a move to Seattle, a life that sounded busy but lonely. Emma listened quietly, her thoughts still tangled. She couldn't stop hearing his words from earlier. You deserve to be reminded that you matter. They had been gentle, respectful, but they left an echo she couldn't silence. When Ryan finally stood to leave, Daniel gave him a friendly hug. "Don't disappear for years again, all right? Come back soon," he said with a laugh. Ryan smiled faintly. "I will. Thanks for dinner, Emma," he said, his tone polite, steady, as if everything between them was perfectly normal. But when she met his eyes, she saw the honesty still there, not longing, just quiet understanding. After he left, the house felt too still. Daniel went upstairs, humming as he checked his emails, while Emma stood at the window, watching Ryan's car disappear into the night. Her chest felt heavy, not with guilt but confusion. She didn't love Ryan, she knew that. But what he had said made her see something she hadn't looked at in years: how distant her marriage had become. There was no anger, no resentment between her and Daniel. Only silence that had settled like dust over time. That night, Emma lay awake beside him. The sound of the rain outside matched the rhythm of her thoughts. Daniel turned in his sleep, unaware of the storm inside her mind. She thought about the woman she used to be: curious, warm, full of laughter, before life became a list of responsibilities. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped expecting to be noticed, stopped expecting words that reminded her of her worth. Ryan hadn't crossed a line. He had just spoken the truth that no one else had. The next morning, Daniel left early for work, leaving his usual quick kiss on her forehead. Emma made coffee and sat by the window, still lost in thought. That's when she noticed a small folded paper near the sugar jar, something that hadn't been there before. She picked it up, realizing it was a note in Ryan's handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Emma, thank you for listening last night. I didn't mean to make things difficult. I just needed to say what I should have said years ago. I'm leaving town today, and I won't reach out again, not because I don't care, but because I respect you and Daniel too much. I just hope you never forget your worth. Some people see you once and never forget. You're that kind of person." Emma read the note twice, her eyes stinging with tears she didn't expect. It wasn't romantic, not in the wrong way. It was honest, almost spiritual. His words weren't about wanting her. They were about appreciating who she was. It was strange how simple words could wake up a part of the heart that had gone quiet. She tucked the note into her journal, unsure why she kept it. Maybe because it reminded her that someone, somewhere, had noticed her beyond her roles, not as Daniel's wife, not as the woman who cooked and cleaned and smiled through long days, but as Emma, a person with thoughts, dreams, and light inside her. Days turned into weeks. But Ryan's words lingered. Emma went through her routine as usual: morning coffee with Daniel, her part-time job at the local bookstore, evening dinners. But something inside her had shifted. She began noticing the small details around her again: the sound of the wind through the trees, the color of the sunset, the softness in people's voices when they spoke about things they loved. She felt more awake, more aware of herself. One evening, as she was setting the table, Daniel looked up from his laptop. "You seem quieter these days. Everything okay?" he asked casually. She paused, unsure how to answer. "I'm fine," she said softly. Then after a moment added, "I've just been thinking a lot." Daniel smiled distractedly, his eyes still on the screen. "Thinking about what?" "About us," she said simply. That made him stop typing. He looked up, confused. "Us? Did something happen?" Emma shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, nothing happened. That's the problem, I think. Nothing happens anymore. We're fine, but we used to talk more, laugh more. Now it feels like we're just living side by side." Daniel leaned back, surprised by her calm tone. "I guess I didn't realize you felt that way," he admitted. "I thought we were just comfortable." "Comfortable," she repeated quietly. "Yes, but comfortable can also mean distant." He didn't reply right away. Instead, he looked at her as if really seeing her for the first time in a long while. The silence that followed wasn't cold, it was full of thought. "You're right," he said finally. "I've been too caught up in work. I didn't notice how much space had grown between us. I'm sorry." That simple apology warmed her more than she expected. It was the first honest conversation they'd had in months. For the rest of the evening, they talked about small things, about how their days had become predictable, about what they missed. It wasn't emotional or dramatic, but it was real later that night. As Daniel sat reading beside her, Emma realized that Ryan's words hadn't created distance in her marriage. They had brought clarity. He had said out loud what she hadn't been able to admit even to herself. Sometimes the right words from the right person can act like a mirror, showing you what you need to face. A few days later, while tidying the living room, Emma found Daniel's old photo album from college. She flipped through the pictures. There was Daniel laughing, young and carefree, with Ryan beside him, arm around his shoulder. Both looked full of life. She smiled softly, tracing the edges of the photo. "Thank you," she whispered under her breath. Not sure if she was speaking to Ryan or to the version of herself that had finally woken up again. From that day, Emma made small changes. She started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. She invited Daniel on evening walks, cooked new recipes, asked questions about his day that led to real answers. Their connection began to quietly rebuild, piece by piece. And though Ryan never returned or called, his words lived on like a soft echo in her heart. Not a reminder of temptation, but of truth. Sometimes people cross your path not to stay, but to awaken something in you. That night, when Ryan spoke the words she didn't know she needed, he didn't change her life with romance, he changed it with honesty. And that kind of truth never really leaves. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly found its rhythm again. The memory of that evening, Ryan's words, his note, the silence that followed had softened, but never faded. Emma went about her days as usual, yet something inside her had shifted for good. She was no longer moving through life on autopilot. There was a quiet awareness in everything she did now, a tenderness in how she looked at the world, and even at herself. Her mornings began earlier. She started sitting by the kitchen window with her coffee, watching the sunrise, something she hadn't done in years. The soft light reminded her of that evening, not because of Ryan, but because that was when she'd truly started to feel again. She realized that before that night she had been living half asleep, lost in a blur of chores, deadlines, and quiet days that all looked the same. Ryan's honesty had woken her up to the parts of herself she had forgotten, the woman who once dreamed, laughed freely, and cared deeply. Daniel noticed the change too. One morning he looked at her across the breakfast table and smiled. "You've been glowing lately," he said. "I don't know what's different, but it suits you." Emma smiled back. "Maybe I just started noticing life again," she said softly. He laughed, not fully understanding, but happy to see her smile. Their marriage began to feel lighter. They talked more, took walks after dinner, and started spending weekends doing small things together, cooking new recipes, watching old movies, or visiting the local farmers market. They weren't suddenly perfect, but they were closer, more present. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet progress, built on conversations that came from the heart. One Sunday morning, while cleaning the living room, Emma came across the old journal she had tucked Ryan's note into. The paper had folded lines now, worn from being opened and closed too many times. She read it again. "You deserve to be reminded that you matter." The words didn't sting anymore. They felt gentle, like a whisper from the past reminding her that she had done the right thing by listening, learning, and moving forward. She took out a pen and turned to a blank page in her journal. For a long time, she stared at it, thinking about how to put her feelings into words. Finally, she began to write. "Dear Ryan, You probably won't ever read this, but I need to say it anyway. That night, you said something that changed me, not because of how you felt, but because you made me realize how I'd stopped feeling at all. You reminded me that being seen isn't about being admired. It's about being understood. I didn't fall for you, but I did wake up because of you. For that, I'm grateful. She paused, smiled softly, and wrote one last line. You didn't come into my life to stay. You came to remind me how to live. She closed the journal, placed it back on the shelf, and felt a wave of peace. The story was finished in her heart, not in a painful way, but in a way that made her grateful for the lesson it brought. Over time, Emma's bond with Daniel deepened. They began sharing their dreams again, things they had long stopped talking about. Daniel admitted he had been afraid that their marriage was becoming routine. I didn't even realize how quiet we'd become, he told her one night while they were out walking. But I'm glad you said something. You've always been stronger than I give you credit for. Emma smiled. We both stopped noticing each other. I think we just forgot how to listen. From then on, they made a promise to never let silence become their normal again. It was small, but it meant everything. Months later, in early autumn, Emma received a postcard in the mail. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Ryan. The card showed a view of Seattle's skyline under a sunset sky. The message was short. Emma, I hope life is kind to you. I just wanted to say I'm happy I spoke that night. You seemed like someone who needed to remember her light, and it looks like you did. Take care, always. Ryan. Emma read it with a gentle smile. She placed the card beside her journal, not with longing, but with peace. She didn't reply. There was no need. Some people entered your life to stay, others just to leave a message, and Ryan had already left his. That evening, Daniel came home to find her in the garden, sitting quietly among the roses she had started planting again. You look happy, he said, sitting beside her. I am, she replied. For the first time in a long while, I really am. They watched the sunset together, the golden light falling across their hands. It wasn't dramatic or movie-like, just to people, rediscovering what they had lost. As the days passed, Emma began focusing on small joys. She started painting again, taking walks with her neighbor, reading poetry before bed. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The color had returned, the silence had softened, and her heart felt open again. One afternoon, while painting by the window, she thought back to that evening, the dinner. The quiet confession, the storm of emotions that had followed. It all felt distant now, like a chapter from a book she once read and learned from. She didn't think of Ryan often anymore, but when she did, it was never with regret. It was with gratitude. He had seen her when she'd forgotten how to see herself. And that was all it took to change the course of her life. Not romance, not drama, just truth. Later that week, Daniel came home with flowers, not for any reason, just because. You've been making the house feel different lately, he said. It feels warmer, feels like home again. Emma smiled and touched his hand. Maybe we'd just started noticing the good things again, she said. That night, as she turned off the lights and looked around the cozy living room, Emma realized something beautiful sometimes. It doesn't take a great event to change your life. Sometimes it's one conversation, one truth. One moment of being seen. Ryan's words had once felt like a ripple of confusion in her calm life. But over time, that ripple had become a wave of healing. She didn't need to see him again to understand what that evening meant. It had not been the start of something forbidden. It had been the start of something honest. She had found her way back to herself. And in doing so, she had found her way back to Daniel. As she lay in bed that night. Her heart felt still, not empty, but complete. Some people come into our lives not to stay, but to awaken the parts of us we let fall asleep. Ryan had done that for her. And though his chapter was closed, the story he helped her rediscover her own was only just beginning.